One other thing, if you could explain, is before you get into this year's budget, or what has been recommended so far, is how the city works this 2-year budget plan. In other words, they're not preparing just for 1 year, they're having a 2-year budget plan. So when he presents it, when Mr. Fraser presents it, it's for 2 years. It's not just for 1 year.
And I think that from my standpoint as an accountant, I feel like the 2 years is almost the worst of the choices. I mean, they used to do it just a year at a time. And in fact, when they pass their budget, they only pass 1 year. The second year is just the recommendations. But I think that you should at least go to 5 years. The DDA actually does 10-year forward-looking planning. So I think that we should be looking 5 years out. I mean, I know it's hard to project, but at least it forces council to think a little bit about what's coming down the road and what's driving your costs. And so, I mean, to me, the motivation very likely to do a 2-year budget is you get the pain over, and you only have the pain once every 2 years. Because, I mean, the first year Roger Fraser did a budget was for 2004. And if you follow through this pattern, every single year we're told that there are going to be all of these cuts, and we just have to make cuts to the budgets, and then you get parks cuts. I mean, we've closed a fire station, police cuts, and then when you go and look at the actual numbers, when the audit is in, they always end up with a profit. You know, they budget for roughly break even, and they end up with a profit, and it's built up in the reserve. I mean, since between '04 and '08, the reserve in the general fund has been increasing because of all of these profits where we cut more than we needed to. Okay, so, and even in '09, the '09 audit is not out yet. The '09 year, there's a fiscal year, so it ends June 30th. So the public still hasn't, we're in December, the year ended in June, and we still haven't seen the audit. I understand that the city CFO, Tom Crawford, has a pencil copy on his desk, but apparently it's not a priority.
I've read, in the online papers that Mr. Fraser said, I think that we're a little over 3 million, 3.5 million short.
Well, all they did at the retreat is he went through the projected income numbers for 2010 and said our revenue is 3.5 million less than we predicted. Okay, but noticeably absent were the expenses. And so, for instance, I know in 2010 you budgeted an expense for the police department. You budgeted 8 people that you haven't replaced them. So that's probably, for half a year, that's probably 400,000. I mean, I would guess that if you ask for a report and say, of the people that you budgeted for 2010, how many bodies are really filling a job, because we've been without a planning director, we've been without a fire chief, and I'm sure there are more. I mean, because again, they've been using attrition and not replacing people. So there's going to be savings. I mean, in 2009, I think the expenses were about $1 million less than was budgeted. So most departments are going to come in under their expenses. So, until you see the expense side, you don't know the whole story.
Okay, so then where would something like the bridge, the stadium bridge, come into the picture? Well, as an expense, I mean, is that listed? I mean, would that be? The
stadium bridge would be budget. The city has something called the capital improvements plan, so they do their spending for the big ticket items in like a separate budget. That's you don't hear about. That's not part of the general fund budget. And the stadium bridge in the latest one, they had just under 10 million of it budgeted coming out of city funds. That's already in there. But it's also interesting to look at the ratings, because things will be urgent. And the stadium bridge may have just gone to urgent, but the police courts building was urgent.
When you said it comes out of city funds, the 10 million.
The 10 million is scheduled out of the streets millage fund.
Out of the streets millage fund. Yeah. So that's a specific and can't be used for anything else, supposedly, right?
Well, supposedly.
Well, that's what I didn't understand. Some of the water money we're using it to plant trees.
Some of the water money we're using to pay for police, too.
And how does that happen when things are supposed to be specific?
You have to come up with some kind of rationale, whether it you know, would whether it would withhold if you got sued, whether it would stand up to that, to make an excuse to get money from pot A to the pot B where you want to spend it. And so supposedly it cost $800,000 a year for our police to protect the water treatment plant.
Ah. Okay.
So our water bills are going to go up, and you know, you get a payback to the general fund when they pass the parks millage. I mean, the Park Advisory Commission has been, so far, it's shown some independence. They wanted to use $250,000 of that millage to pay for police. And you know, that wasn't the voters. They didn't think they were voting for a police millage. They thought they were voting for a parks millage. And then there's these things called municipal service charges. So the city general fund charges these other funds, the streets millage and the water and sewer funds, the charges for whatever the general fund does for them. And those things seem to, I mean, people don't underestimate in accounting how much estimating goes on. You know, they see the number and they assume they're exact to the penny, and they're not. I mean, salary is the biggest expense.
Right.
And some place is sitting in a room and deciding, well, for instance, I think 100% of Sue McCormick's time should be charged to the water fund. That's where she is in this year's budget.
Oh.
Yeah. So there's some interesting, you can do a lot with that.